what's going on, everybody? This is Nigel, your favorite realtor with Coldwell Banker American Homes, and today we're going to be giving you the national real estate market update. And this is going to be a good one because the last few weeks have been packed with a bunch of headlines that really actually matter for those of you looking to buy or sell your home. So if you're feeling like the market has kind of been moving, but at the same time, you're just kind of confused, this is not something that you're imagining, right? So let's talk about the most common thing that we're hearing discussed, which is mortgage rates. So as of around the end of January, we're seeing the Freddie Mac, which has the 30-year fixed at just over 6%, and the 15-year fixed is at about 5.45%. So why does this matter? It matters because rates being in the low sixes is a very different story than when we were flirting with the high sixes or the 7 range. So it's not necessarily, open season, cheap payments, right? But it's enough to really entice buyers to want to get back into the game of buying a home. So here's the thing, that really stuck out to me in a report, that I recently was reading on, right? So nationally, we're seeing U.S. pending sales actually had plunged down 9.3%, which is a 5-month low. So it sounds kind of dramatic, but in real life kind of translation, it doesn't necessarily mean that buyers completely have disappeared. It just means that buyers, and this is something that I'm seeing with buyers I'm working with, they're hesitating more, when the math feels tight, right? They're being more selective, right? Another article that I recently read pointed out something that was very important, that I find very significant, which is that existing home sales rose a little over 5% in December, right? At the same time, inventory also dropped hard, and we're at about a 3-month supply nationally. So nationally, we have this weird kind of push, kind of pull dynamic going on, and rates, they have improved compared to last year, which helps demand, but inventory is still tight, especially, in those, the common price points where you're seeing the most people shopping, right? And because affordability is something that is still very challenging, buyers are very cautious, but they're not quite panicking like they have been in the past, but they're still very much so being, negotiating a lot. So let's talk about prices nationally, because everybody wants to know, are prices dropping or not, right? Over the last couple of weeks, the data has kind of been very consistent on one point, right? And that nationally, price growth has kind of slowed, but it's not really a crash, right? And this is where it gets very interesting for New York and the Northeast, which is something that I've been discussing with a lot of my sellers lately, on listing appointments and prepping them to hit the market, right? And it's pointed that some of the strongest appreciation that we're seeing is in the Northeast and the Midwest, right? And specifically, we're seeing New York as one of the stronger growth areas, which brings me to Queens and Long Island, because New York and especially Queens, Long Island just don't behave like places like Florida or Phoenix, right? The Sun Belt. We're seeing the Queens market, based on a lot of data that we're seeing, Queens actually hit a record in Q4 of 2025 and was up a little bit over 5.5%, right? And sales were also up, year over year. So Long Island, Nassau County specifically, is still very much strong. It's still very much so a seller's market, compared to what we're seeing happening nationally, which is very interesting. So the Northeast is still very, very strong when it comes to price, and this is one of the only areas that's still very much so a seller's market. So this what explains why prices have stayed strong locally, even when the national headlines still are very shaky. And it's because Long Island inventory is just still very tight, right? There's a lot of articles that are talking about how homes for sale are sinking to a record low, especially in Nassau, right? And so what this means is when you combine, low inventory with rates in the low sixes, what it means on the ground in Queens and Long Island is it means that good homes are still very much so moving, especially if priced right, if it's showing well, it's definitely going to get attention, especially in the move-in ready type of homes, because at the end of the day, there's just not enough of it right now. So people are just jumping all over it. So buyers are definitely in the market. Nationally, they're just a little bit more picky. They're less likely to overpay just to win the way that they used to. They're very much so more likely to negotiate, request credits, or even just walk away if they feel like, they're getting into a deal that's overpriced. So sellers can't quite live in 2022, but it's still a very much so a seller's market in the right areas. So if you're presenting well in Queens, Nassau, there's still a lot of demand in these areas, and the numbers really are supporting that based on what we're seeing with the data. So what does this mean for you, right? So if you're somebody who's thinking about buying, this is not the moment to wait for a magical rate drop. Rates move, but inventory is still the bigger story, especially here in the Northeast. The smart buyers right now are prepared, they're decisive, they're focused on value, and they're asking for seller credits when it makes sense, right? And if you're a seller, the move is not renovate everything. The move is to present clean, to fix obvious buyer objections, and to really price strategically. And these are just the basics, right? Because buyers are comparing everything, and they just have unrealistic patience right now, zero patience for unrealistic numbers and overpriced properties. So the bottom line is that nationally, the market is cautious. Locally, Queens and Long Island, the market is still very much so supported by the tight supply, which is keeping the home prices very resilient. And that's really the update. And if you want me to break this down for your exact neighborhood, for your price range, that's where the real strategy is going to come in. So if you have any questions specifically pertaining to purchasing a home, or if you're on the fence about looking to sell your home, feel free to contact me. All of my information is down below. You can call me, email me, and I'll be happy to discuss with you and create a strategy for you to get into the home of your dreams, or to help you to sell your home for top dollar. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day. Take care. Stay safe.